Please can I welcome everybody to this meeting of Cabinet on Wednesday the 13th of September from the Walton Suite, Winchester, Guildhall. The time is 9:32 a.m. My name is Councillor Martin Todd, Chairperson of the Council of the Cabinet and Leader of the Council. This meeting is being live streamed from the Council's YouTube channel, and the recording will also be available after the meeting. Subtitles can be switched on, and advice on how to turn these on is set out on our website. Can everyone please ensure that mobile phones are on silent or switched off? And can I remind members to use their microphones when talking so that the recording picks up their comments. In the unlikely event that it is necessary to evacuate the building, the fire alarm will sound. Please follow all the instructions given to you by our team. Can I welcome members of the public to this meeting this morning? We will invite you forward when it is time to make your contribution. Turning to the agenda, the first item of business is apologies for absence. I have apologies from Councillor Christopher Westwood. Are there any other apologies? I don't believe so. The second item is membership of Cabinet bodies. We have a resolution to replace for Councillor Rutter to replace Councillor Scott as a non-voting member of the Cabinet Housing Committee. Is that agreed? The third item of business is disclosure of interests. I will make the normal declaration that as a county councillor, there are some elements where county and city responsibilities overlap, but it is a personal and not a pecuniary interest. Councillor Porter, I believe you need to make the same declaration.
I would like to make the same declaration. It's a personal but not pecuniary interest. Because I'm a county councillor, and therefore I don't believe that I have any particular, as I say, just a personal interest, but not a pecuniary interest today.
Thank you very much indeed. Are there any other interests that anyone wishes to declare? No. I have a list of councillors to speak. I have requests from councillors Wallace, Lee, Horrell and Bolton to speak on the various items in front of us today. If I understand correctly, it's councillors Lee and Horrell speaking on item 8, the Local Authority Housing Fund, councillors Lee and Bolton speaking on item 9 on the Public Toilets Improvement Strategy, councillors Wallace, Lee and Bolton speaking on the Carbon Neutrality Action Plan, councillors Wallace and Horrell speaking on the General Fund outturn, councillors Wallace and Horrell speaking on the Housing Revenue Account outturn, and councillor Horrell speaking on the Q1 Finance and Performance Monitoring. Have I understood that correctly? Thank you very much. We also, I'm pleased to say, have some members of the public that wish to make deputations. We have David Chafe and Monica Gill from TACT, and I believe you wish to speak on the Local Authority Housing Fund and on the Housing Revenue Account. We have These are parts on that. Okay, I will make a note on that. We have Mr. Tate, who wishes to speak on the Local Authority Housing Fund and the Public Toilets Improvement Strategy. We don't have Mr. Perkins here, do we? No. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I hope he is better soon. And Joe Crocker from Winchester Action on Climate Change, who wants to speak on the Carbon Neutrality Action Plan. So anyone, if I've got any of that wrong, please let me know. It appears not. The next item of business is number 6, the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 18th of July 2023. Cabinet, are those Minutes agreed. We now move on to leader and cabinet announcements. Let's start with Councillor Thompson. I believe you have an announcement.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I'm delighted to announce that we will be holding our second District Jobs and Opportunities Fair at the Winchester Sport and Leisure Centre, coming up on Thursday, the 23rd of November. Our first fair, held in February this year, was hugely successful. We had 37 employers taking part from both local organisations such as our universities, local schools, and Marwell, to national companies such as the Nationwide Building Society, the NHS, and Warburton's. It was incredibly busy with queues to get in and a packed sports hall full of prospective job seekers. And feedback from both the organisations taking part and the job seekers themselves was that they wanted us to arrange another one. We know that over the last few years, businesses have been really struggling to find the staff they need, as we have too here at the City Council. So what better opportunity for employers and job seekers alike to come along and find out what opportunities are available within the district. So if you are a business or organisation and would like to host a stall, please get in touch with the City Council local economy team and they will talk you through the arrangements. And obviously, if you're also someone looking to see what our businesses and organisations have to offer, whether it's new employment or even volunteering for some of those organisations, please put this date in your diary and come along. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Porter, I believe you might have an announcement.
Yes, thank you. The Council's Animal Welfare Team has achieved a double platinum award. That's only been given to 3 councils: the City of Westminster, City of London, and Winchester. So we are a very privileged group. But it's given because we've received gold paw prints for 5 or more years for 2 different services, both the stray dog services and the animal activity licensing. And our team are very dedicated and very experienced. And it's a real pleasure to see that award given to them. That will be actually made, the award will be made later on in the year, but we have received notice of it and it's very exciting to hear, particularly in the week when dogs aren't getting good press.
Indeed, and that's the RSPCA Paw Prints Award, is it?
RSPCA Platinum Paw Prints Award.
Excellent news. Thank you very much indeed. And yes, absolutely. I can ask the Chief Executive to pass on the congratulations of Cabinet for that excellent achievement. Councillor Becker.
Thank you. I'm going to be greedy and I've got 2. The first is I'm really happy to say that our largest and most popular sporting event is taking place tomorrow afternoon at the Winchester Sport and Leisure Park. It's the Paralympic Personal Best event. We have over 200 adults with a range of physical and learning disabilities registered to attend, which is already 50 more than last year. So we know it's going to be a fantastic day. We have champion Paralympian Maisie Summers-Newton coming along to support the event. She'll be there in the afternoon to watch the action and to hand out medals and certificates. So it should be a really fantastic event if people are able to pop along. And my second announcement is in relation to the Ukraine Support Fund. We announced at the end of July that we would be launching this fund to support our guests from Ukraine to integrate into the community. So up to £500 is available to be put towards a specific need that helps these individuals live independently in our community and to become part of their local community. So these funds can be used for removing language barriers, improving employability, improving digital connectivity. Response has been overwhelming. We've already had 80 applications, of which we've processed 44 and have approved 32. So we have supported people with transportation, providing funding for additional English language classes, supporting employment opportunities with assistance to have qualifications recognised, and providing support for community activities for children and young people. So if there are people hosting Ukrainian guests who think this could be helpful, or Ukrainian guests themselves, please get in touch with the housing team. They'll be able to point you in this direction.
Thank you very much indeed. Do we have any other announcements? I have an announcement, which is I was checking in with the officers yesterday, and I'm very pleased to announce that the demolition of the former Friarsgate surgery in the central Winchester area has started. At the moment, it's the inside work that's being done, so we may not see an immediate change in the skyline. But this is a really important contributor towards the redevelopment of the central Winchester area, and I'm delighted to announce that the work has started. Right. If there are no more announcements, we will now move on to the Local Authority Housing Fund. Because Councillor Westwood isn't here, I will be introducing this paper. As colleagues will remember, in December 2022, the government announced a local authority housing fund to support Afghan and Ukrainian refugees. We enthusiastically participated, and to date we've used that fund in the main to buy back HMOs, turn them into family homes, and support vulnerable families. The first round of this funding enabled us to purchase 17 extra homes under the programme. The purpose of the paper today is to confirm our acceptance of 2 further rounds of funding, one for 22 properties and one for a further 6 properties, and the associated capital expenditure from the housing revenue account in order to complete those purchases and to make the houses available on the timing required. Not all of this will be buy back existing homes, some of them will be new, but this is allowing us to get extra affordable council homes that would otherwise not be possible. And I would like to pay tribute to officers for their work on this. It's important to note that not every council that was offered this money has either been able or willing to accept it. One of the reasons why we've been offered more money is because of the professionalism and effectiveness of our officers and being able to execute in the earlier rounds. So not every council has either the capacity, the capability, or the will to get behind this programme. But thanks to the officers involved, we have been able to deliver on it in the first 2 rounds, and a confidence in our ability to deliver in future rounds. I think this programme also shows what matters to us, not just supporting refugees who are fleeing the horrendous situation in Ukraine and Afghanistan, but also our absolute commitment to increasing the number of affordable council homes available in our district. I won't go on at great length. You've all had a chance to read the paper, but I will move on now to accept the deputations that we had highlighted and hear the questions and comments from the public and from councillors. So I have 2 deputations for this. First of all, David Chafe from TACT, would you like to come forward and make your comments on the paper?
Thank you very much, Leader, for being able to ask a question. On page 21, item 111, comment is the proposal will be discussed with TACT. Feedback will be provided. When this idea came up before, we supported it in every way. So what we would like to say is we support the council plan priority to allow further homes to be acquired, an increase from 17 to 45 units. TACT supported the round 1A and continue with this proposal. We were only able to discuss this at a TACT support meeting because our TAC meeting is not till the 21st of September. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, and your support for these proposals and tax support for these proposals is greatly appreciated. Mr. Tate.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to address Cabinet. Whilst I wholeheartedly support the programme, I do have to question why the funds are immediately coming from the HRA when it is possible that some of these properties will not be available to people bidding on Hampshire Home Choice for possibly many years, perhaps indefinitely. The report doesn't specifically say why the funds can't come from the general fund. And I would point out that general fund monies were used to purchase the Friarsgate Medical Centre, an empty building being demolished, the bus station, which is still a bus station. So I do seriously question why the responsibility for funding this programme immediately comes from the HRA. Surely it could come from general funds, and then as those properties become available for bidding on Hampshire Home Choice, the HRA could purchase those funds. We know that there's a desperate shortage of affordable housing for local people in Winchester. But why are the tenants initially picking up the responsibility to fund this programme and not the general fund? I have a particular interest in housing matters, and invariably tenants are advised if they want replacement doors, if they want work done to their property, they're advised that there is a shortage of money in the HRA, which isn't actually the case. It's how those funds are allocated. So I don't want to in any way cast aspersions on the programme, which is absolutely commendable, but I do question why it is being shouldered initially by the HRA, and essentially it's depriving that capital sum, which could be providing housing now and not in an indeterminate moment in time when those properties are vacated. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Tate. So you've raised the question. Well, I think this is probably one where we need clarification in terms of the points made. My understanding, and I believe the paper says this, is that the houses that we're purchasing will be owned by the HRA, managed by the HRA, and in practice, well, and available to people on Hampshire Home Choice. Mr. Hendy, can you kind of explain exactly how the arrangement works and why we funded this from the HRA?
Yes, thank you, Leader. If you remember, this debate took place under the first round. Clearly, the government didn't want to allocate money to local authorities. Local authorities purchase properties and then sit empty, waiting for a Ukrainian or Afghan family to move into them. So the decision was that they could be offered to existing families on the housing register, but the council would make a commitment to house a number of Ukrainian families and Afghan families in relation to the funding available. Picking up Mr. Tate's point, why the HRA, not the general fund? Well, I think what I've just said answers that question. A number of people will be coming off the housing register straight into HRA properties. It will be the Afghan families that will be coming primarily by the homeless route. But overall, it's an increasing demand for housing in Winchester, and the government programme allows the overall housing stock available to meet housing need to be increased, regardless of the route by which households might come forward.
Thank you. So this funding and this plan allows us to get more council homes faster than would have otherwise been the case, which are immediately available, there is an associated requirement to house Afghan and to play our part as a community in housing Afghan and Ukrainian refugees. But the increase in the availability of housing to the general fund is immediate. It's faster than it would have happened otherwise. And we have more houses sooner than we would have done otherwise as a result of this programme. Is that a fair summary?
Yes, Leader. And of course, if the programme hadn't taken place, we would still have obligations to provide housing for these households, but without the additional 45 homes. So those 45 households will be using up the existing supply of affordable housing in the district.
Thank you very much indeed for that clarification. Councillor Horrell, I believe you wish to make a deputation or raise some questions on this paper.
Good morning, and thank you for allowing me to address Cabinet this morning. I wanted to begin by saying thank you to the government for making the monies available. What a wonderful opportunity. And in particular, well done to officers for working at pace and securing several rounds of funding. Clearly, not everyone was able to do that. And obviously, our skills and knowledge in our core housing skills has helped us there to be able to deliver and obviously then enjoy additional funds. So well done to everyone. I do very much support this opportunity. As many of you know, I have a Ukrainian guest, so I'm very interested in how we as an authority are approaching this. And clearly there is a long-term benefit for our housing stock that hopefully when the Ukrainians are able to return home, as many of them do wish to, those additional 45 homes, as Mr. Hendy has said, will be available to our own residents more broadly. I know the paper says that we wish to return many HMOs as part of this process to family homes, and indeed some of our communities have raised this with us for some time. But I still just want to assure myself and ask the Cabinet and officers that we have enough accommodation for Ukrainians who are not in family units. Many of them are on their own, some of the young people who've come here, and to ensure that those individuals still will be able to access accommodation. If that's not in an HMO, that we can obviously use other parts of our estate to do so. I'm just looking for reassurance on that, given that HMOs for Ukrainians seem to be off the agenda as part of this approach. So I'd be grateful for that, Chair. But overall, I think this is a great step for us as an authority, long-term benefit for all residents. And I'm grateful also for tax support, because clearly the HRA is the mechanic for us to proceed on this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell, and thank you also, as you referenced, for your work or your personal commitment to accommodating Ukrainian refugees. We recently held an event for the hosts that have accommodated refugees in our community, and I had a chance to say a few words there and talked about the fact that although we as a community have said that we stand with Ukraine, it is actually the hosts that have really brought that commitment to life. I think your question about will we have the right mix of housing, and in particular, we're buying HMOs, we're turning them back into family homes as part of this programme, but there will also be individuals who fled Ukraine and need accommodation, and will we be able to accommodate them, which is a very fair and useful question. I believe the answer is yes, but Mr. Hendy, are you able to provide extra perspective on that?
Yes, Leader, we're definitely doing that. I'm aware of 2 specific proposals that we're actively working on at the moment to assess viability of that. So we can give you that assurance that is the case. We will be providing accommodation for single people on a shared basis in some stock that the council already owns, subject to the viability being worked out.
Thank you very much indeed. That's very reassuring. Cabinet, now move on to any questions that you may have about this paper. I don't know if any Cabinet colleagues have any questions they would like to ask. It is relatively straightforward and something I think easy for us to get behind. Any potential debate? Anybody want to debate the paper? Councillor Porter.
I'd just like to point out that it describes it as shared funding and match funding, but actually the City Council is, the HRA fund is contributing 60% of the funding. And I think that's really important to point out. It's a really significant amount of money. And I think it makes it even more important that the HRA and that TACT support this. And I'm really pleased they do. So thank you.
Yes, that's a good point. It's important also in terms of the business case. I think we demonstrate that the money that's put in from the HRA is paid back and is an economically prudent investment as far as the HRA is concerned, and that the extra rent that will be generated as a result of having these extra houses does actually pay back the HRA for the amount that's being put in. Any other debate on the subject? Well, in that case, well, first of all, thank you for your comments. Thank you for the deputations that were made. That's enabled us to clarify a few things. This, as I said earlier, is a paper that I think reflects not only our desire to support people who have faced terrible situations in their home countries, but also increase the number of affordable council homes available in our district in a way that supports the HRA, means that we have more council houses faster than we would have done otherwise, while at the same time supporting those in need. And as others have mentioned, as I said in my introduction, we're only able to do this because of the capacity, the capability, the hard work and the commitment of our council officers. Other places haven't been able to. So we're very grateful for all the work that's been done. The recommendations in front of us are to agree a revised memorandum of understanding for round 1B to enable the provision of an extra 22 homes under the programme. In addition to the grant that's been used to buy 15 houses already, to authorise additional capital expenditure of up to 4.375 million to acquire and refurbish the remaining 7 properties required. To enter into a memorandum of understanding with DLUC to secure 1.2396 million of round 2 funding for a further 6 homes. And the associated capital expenditure of 2.9175 million to acquire and refurbish those homes, and to agree delegation to the corporate head of asset management and the director with responsibility for housing to purchase the 13 properties. So that's the recommendation in front of us. Cabinet, are you agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to the next paper, an item close to my heart, which is the Pride in Place Public Toilets Improvement Strategy. Councillor Lurney, would you like to introduce the paper?
Thank you, Leader. Public toilets are a very important service for our residents and visitors, and with annual running costs of £200,000 covering cleaning and utility costs, and between £30,000 and £70,000 a year in annual repairs, it is a significant item of expenditure for us at a time when council finances are under extreme pressure. Last year, listening to comment and concern about our public toilets and experiencing increasing levels of antisocial behaviour, it was clear that we couldn't continue to take a piecemeal approach to our toilet provision. As a result, we set up a public toilet working group led by Councillor Gordon Smith to review the situation and drive change. We have carried out a number of pieces of work, including bringing in the British Toilet Association to do a report, full condition surveys and usage surveys, and these have helped us establish the extent of what was needed. Carrying out proper counts of our toilet usage across the district has highlighted the very high load on particular toilets at peak times. For example, over 800 people using just the female toilets in Market Lane in one day this month. But it's also highlighted relatively low levels of usage elsewhere. Those usage surveys are still going on at the moment, and when finished will inform final decisions about cleaning regimes and refurbishment. For clarity about priorities in the context of the level of pressure on the council budget, we have written a public toilet improvement strategy and are proposing that the council undertake a major programme of improvements funded from the parking reserve and subject to further approval, the community infrastructure levy. Separately, we plan to use some of the funding set aside for Pride in Place to test an enhanced cleaning regime in our busiest sets of toilets. And I'm pleased to say we will have a full-time person focusing on Abbey Gardens and Market Lane toilets to test out whether that reduces antisocial behaviour and ultimately will save us money rather than it being an additional cost. Without going into too much detail, because you can read the strategy for yourselves, the strategy sets out our vision for toilets within the district, which is that residents and visitors to Winchester District have access to toilets in key locations, which are comfortable, clean, safe, well maintained and cater for the whole community. The objectives of the strategy are to improve availability of toilets, to have sustainable toilets, inclusive toilets catering for all members of our community, toilets which are safe and with very low levels of antisocial behaviour, cost effectiveness, and finally, but very importantly, cleanliness. The strategy recognises that toilets are made available to the public, not just by the council, but a range of other public and commercial bodies. And we will be looking at how we can work in partnership with others, including some of our town and parish councils, to increase, improve and signpost available toilets beyond those the City Council can afford to provide. I'm very pleased to be able to bring this to Cabinet today. I know we've been waiting for it for quite a long time, and I look forward to seeing some major improvements over the next year. So happy to take questions and listen to representations from the public and fellow councillors.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Lenny, and indeed we have Mr. Tate here who wishes to make a deputation on the subject of public toilets.
Thank you, Chair, for a further opportunity to address this Cabinet Committee. It's a great shame that Julian Perkins isn't here today. You will recall he spoke very powerfully at your meeting on the 21st of January about issues confronting him and the use of a disabled lavatory. And I appreciate this paper was already in formulation, but I do think that what Julian said at that stage, it had a significant impact. I would also like to highlight and endorse the work of the British Toilet Association, and in particular, Raymond Martin, their chair, and my thanks to you, Leader, because I know that you've liaised with Mr. Martin and also with Richard Chisnell. Richard, a local resident, is the lifelong president of the British Toilet Association, and he has campaigned tirelessly for better lavatories across the country, but specifically for public lavatories. Sadly, well, fortunately, he's recently had a hip replacement, so I think that's the reason why he's not here today, but he may possibly be watching on the YouTube, on the live stream. I applaud and support the capital programme, but I think the issues that Mr. Perkins highlighted and the issues that I pick up from market traders, and Matt, the flower seller, is a very useful person to talk to. It is the ongoing maintenance of the public lavatories where we fall down. I used the convenience before this meeting, and they were in a good condition, and there is a new employee for Wettons, a Polish lady who is doing a very good job, and I hope that she will be the person who will cover Abbey Gardens and Market Lane. But I know it's a subject which it sometimes prompts some humour, but it is absolutely essential that public lavatories are available and in a good condition. And the relationship between the quality of public lavatories and people's health is being clearly demonstrated increasingly. So I appreciate it's a discretionary service, but it is something I think we need to applaud. And just lastly, the water fountain in Market Lane is still not working. I did mention that in January, so sorry to keep on about that, but it's a great facility. I use the one in Abbey Gardens, and it would be great if Market Lane could either be turned on or taken away. Thank you very much, Chair. Appreciate the opportunity to address.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Early, do you want to respond quickly, or do you want to wait until we've had all the comments?
No, I will respond. I'd just like to reassure Mr. Tate that ongoing maintenance is part of what we're looking at through the refurbishment programme in terms of making toilets much easier to both clean and look after overall. So that is part of the specification.
I also spoke to officers yesterday about the water fountain. It is a matter of some bafflement at the moment because the water supply is going to the fountain, and in theory, the operation of the fountain is powered by the water. There's no electricity or anything else involved. In theory, if you press the button, the water should come out. So it is a matter of some bafflement to us at the moment. Various plumbers have been to look at it. We continue to try and work out why it isn't working and what it will take to get it working again properly. It turns out the water fountains aren't as straightforward as one might have thought in terms of how they operate. But please be assured it is a priority, and time and effort is being spent in trying to get it working again. I have two councillors who wish to make a deputation. I have Councillor Lee and Councillor Bolton. Councillor Lee, I think your name came in first, so would you like to come forward and say a few words?
Thank you, Leader, for allowing me to speak this morning. Improving the toilet provision and their standard is wholeheartedly supported. Likewise, the improvements to meet the environmental considerations. I have a concern, a question, plus one suggestion. At para 7.2, can I ask for it to be strengthened to set the direction of improvements for refurbishments as close as possible to carbon net zero for energy and water use? The use of the word possible in this paragraph seems to be weak, given the need to deliver all we do with consideration to the climate emergency and the carbon neutrality action plan. Not in the improvement strategy, but I believe a toilet twinning approach has merit. Can each of our public toilets be twinned through a toilet twinning scheme? One example for this approach is through an organisation called Toilet Twinning. It's a joint venture between the NGO Tier Fund and Cord. It has low admin costs to deliver the biggest impact possible for people living in poverty in some of the world's poorest countries. Every toilet twinned celebrates a new toilet for a family living in a poorer country, and the average size of the household is 6 people. So, for example, a £60 donation represents help for one family of 6. No doubt there'll be some detractors to using our tight funding for this idea, but it does demonstrate a method to highlight how we care not only for the residents and visitors through the strategy of upgrades, but also to the less fortunate further afield. This could also provide good publicity for the council. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And Councillor Bolton, would you like to come forward and make your deputations? And then I'll ask Councillor Lerney to respond to both sets of comments.
I'm delighted the administration finally have a plan to invest in our public toilets, which have for some time been literally a stain on the district, forgive the pun. My first observation has to be the shocking cost to renovate the public toilets in general. My shock is only eclipsed by the fact this paper proposes to spend 425,000 on 7 city centre toilets and only 80,000 on the 4 toilets in the district in Denmead, Wickham, Bishop's Waltham and New Alresford. Can you explain how you have managed to secure such relatively bargain workmanship, or why so much less appears to be once again going to the wider rural district? Only last week, one of my ward's residents brought to Councillor Todd and mine's attention the shameful state of, I think it was Market Lane he was referring to, public toilets. This only emphasises the poor quality of maintenance, as raised by Mr. Tate, and the cleaning services currently in force. Rather than review the maintenance contract at the end of next year, when this comes up, this should be brought forward as soon as possible. Can you assure us that action will also be taken immediately to improve the state of these toilets whilst the programme of refurbishment is undertaken? Thank you very much.
Councillor Lerney.
Thank you, Leader. Turning to Councillor Lee's comments first, we will be making our best endeavours on this, but clearly some of the toilets will, we do have limited amounts of funding available, and some of the toilets will have relatively light touch refurbishments, whereas having a look at going fully net zero will obviously require a bigger programme, which we'll need to look at separately. In terms of toilet twinning, that sounds like a grant from the council to me, rather than something that we would do as part of our core budgets, but officers may like to contribute to that. In terms of the district toilets, I do apologise. It really is a rookie error.
Sounds like Councillor Lerney is going to be sponsoring one of the twins' toilets.
In terms of the district toilets, in fact, Wickham and Alresford are amongst the toilets which have most recently been refurbished. So we have actually carried out some work on those. Well, I say in recent times. Unfortunately, we really in the past 10 years have not done sufficient refurbishments of our toilets. It's been very sporadic in terms of what we've done, and this is why we've essentially brought forward a full programme at this point, going back to trying not to do these things piecemeal. The amounts of money proposed also to a degree reflect the usage of toilets. As we've said, the usage of toilets and the results of the condition surveys that have been undertaken, which have established the levels of work that are required. Certainly, we are currently talking to parish councils about improvements which might be made to the toilets, and whether they can assist us in improving the cleaning and maintenance of those toilets. So that is an ongoing piece of work. As we've said, this is around making sure that we have decent toilets across the district. So we're certainly not forgetting about areas outside the city, but we do need to recognise that those toilets which are under most pressure are in the city centre. And that's something which we do have to bear in mind. So I wonder if officers would like to contribute around toilet twinning.
Yes, Lee, it's very interesting because it is something that I pointed out to Mr. Hickman when I first started here, because I worked at a local authority that did actually subscribe to toilet twinning. There was an idea there that although it's a relatively small contribution to toilet twinning elsewhere in third world and developed countries, it sort of showed the benefit of having our own public conveniences and sort of put it in that context. There's no budget for this at the moment, so it will be a new commitment if the council wants to consider that, and we can bring forward proposals if you want to look at it.
Thank you very much indeed. Hamlet, does anybody else have any questions that they would like to ask about this? Councillor Becker.
Sorry, one very simple one. We have reference to baby change facilities in all male and female toilets, but not in disabled toilets. Do we have baby change facilities in the disabled toilets?
Not generally speaking, no, we don't.
Could we explore putting them in, please?
Again, I think that's probably beyond what we've designed up with this particular project, so we'd have to look at that more widely. I mean, there are baby changing facilities in some toilets. They're not in the disabled toilets, but I can see where you're coming from. But we are looking at changing places as well, and we're looking at partnership work, so it's something we might be able to pick up through that.
Thank you. I'm just recognising that people in wheelchairs also have babies, and so having baby change facilities at a level where they could change their child would be beneficial if we can do some budget work to look at that.
Any other questions? Councillor Porter.
We know that many of the cafes and restaurants, and actually some shops, also have toilets. How will we be engaging with them to make sure that those are available and in a standard that we would hope to maintain across the whole city, and that they are used too? Because often when we visit other cities, that's how we use public toilets, because they are actually as part of the service offered by a cafe or restaurant.
Thank you. That is something that we are considering exploring in the future. Right now we're focusing on the refurbishment programme and discussions with the parish councils, but certainly in other areas then there are schemes which exist to highlight toilets which for example local cafes may make available to the public, and in some areas they receive payment for that, and that can be a very cost-effective way of providing toilets in particular places, particularly where it might be difficult to find either the money or the space for a standalone public toilet as such. So that certainly is something that we're planning to explore in the future.
Councillor Colour.
Yeah, I understand from the early returns on the usage figures that the Chesil car park toilets are very, very underused. Do you think there is a case for improved signage to them?
Definitely, and this is something which again we've realised that we do have toilets close to the city centre which are, as you might say, underused, and that is something which we'll need to look at going forward. I will say in terms of the programme, the Chesil toilets are in a very bad state, but I think the usage figures highlight the need for us to think slightly differently than we have in the past, rather than assume that we've got the right toilets in the right place already.
Any further questions? I've got a couple of questions. How much, I mean, just for order of magnitude, because there was discussion about how much this investment is in the city and how much is in the rural areas. I just wondered if you were to take the St Maurice's covered toilets, or the Market Lane toilets, call them what you will, and let's say Abbey Gardens, how does their usage compare to a toilet in a market town?
We're still working on the full figures, but certainly the initial estimates are looking like it's around 6 times more use of each of those toilets than we're seeing in the toilets in our market towns. which explains why we're looking at the enhanced cleaning regimes and having a presence to reduce antisocial behaviour. I mean, it's not surprising when you think about 800 people in a day using the ladies' toilets in Market Lane, you know, plus more using the men's, that we do have occasional issues there. I mean, when we've looked at the level of complaints, it was surprisingly low. But as we know, a lot of complaints come forward not through the conventional complaints channel, but through social media and people highlighting issues. So we're not taking that level of complaint as being, you know, something that we're going to base our work on.
Thank you. And another question, and I think Mr. Hickman had a chart on this in the recent scrutiny meeting, which is, well, exactly how much investment has there been on refurbishment and other things since, say, 2011?
Well, since 2010, we've only refurbished 4 of our toilets. So Abbey Gardens in 2010, nearly 100,000 on those, that was a full refurbishment. 28,000 on Wickham in 2015-16, 32,000 on Market Lane in 17-18, and 19,000 last year on Station Road, Alresford.
Thank you. So during the 8 years of Conservative administration, only 2 toilets were refurbished. Is that correct?
Yes.
8 wasted years, really, isn't it? Good, thank you. Is there any debate? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, just a few comments really to make. I mean, firstly, I'm very, very pleased to support this paper. As Cabinet Member with responsibility for our visitor economy across the district, I know that toilets, their availability, cleanliness and quality of those toilets is a really important factor, both for visitors to our city and district and also residents. When I visited the market towns recently, it was one of the subjects that came up time and time again, with questions about whether our cleaning contract provided the right frequency of cleaning and whether the maintenance and quality of our toilets was adequate. So I'm really pleased to see that discussions are being held with our town and parish councils to see how we can best work together to provide better, cleaner and you know, just upgraded facilities. The availability of public toilets has been highlighted in the British Toilet Association's report, which pointed out that there was insufficient capacity in Winchester town itself, particularly at times of high demand. And we've heard that the usage of Market Lane female toilets, you know, 800 plus visitors in just one day. That is enormous. And this was the capacity in the town itself was also brought home to the local economy team a few months ago when we were preparing for a large number of coaches to visit the city. These were coaches coming off the cruise ships in Southampton, and they were visiting for, you know, part of the day, following in between going onwards, and there was real concern that our provision in Abbey Gardens, because of course all the coaches tip up in just outside Abbey Gardens, would just not be sufficient. So in fact, on that occasion, we made sure that the toilets in the Guildhall were made available to cope with the extra demand. And I am really aware that it's so important the facilities we offer are clean and hygienic, and that when visitors come to our city, they go away with a positive, lasting impression. We are so lucky to live in such a beautiful city and district, and we just want those visitors to think, yes, I've had a really nice experience. The toilets were clean. And I know, you know, that's a bit of a, you can joke about that, but actually there are things that stick in people's minds. So it's really important that we have good facilities so that they go away with a really positive, lasting impression, and that they're eager to come and visit again. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other debate or comment? Councillor Becker.
Thank you. Very quick. As you know, I have 2 young children, so I am a frequent user of our public toilets, and on occasion they have been dirty. It's a very sad thing for councillors that we walk around taking photos of these things, but I have reels of dirty toilets on my phone, so I'm really pleased to see that there is a real effort being made to ensure that the toilets are maintained, that they are kept clean, that there's sufficient paper, very important with little girls, and for some residents, the need for those clean toilets is a medical need as well, that they may have reasons why they need to be able to wash their hands with soap, be able to dry them well, so they can continue on with their days. So it's fantastic that we are going to be improving the cleanliness of the toilets. I'm also really happy to see the references to the changing places facilities and the work that we're not committing to it today in this paper, but the continued work to look to see if we can provide a changing place facility in the city centre. If you speak to those who use those facilities, they are an absolute life changer. They mean that you can go out, you can have a day out in the city and know that there is somewhere to be changed, or to be able to change someone that you care for, and that allows a freedom that currently doesn't really exist. So that would be brilliant if we can continue that work. And I know this is a particular issue for Councillor Todd, the importance of sanitary bins being in men's toilets as well. That's a fantastic addition. So thank you for doing that. I'm really happy to support, I have to say it, the toilet paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Any final comments, Councillor Lerny?
No, I'd just like to thank Cabinet and councillors for their words of support for this. I think we do all know that this is a really important item in terms of public perception and how people see our towns, and not only Winchester itself, but the market towns too. So this is an area of work which will be ongoing. One of the things that we do need to consider is the ongoing levels of antisocial behaviour, and I think that's going to need much wider work for us as a council, rather than it just being a toilet programme.
No, I agree, Councillor Lerny, and thank you for those comments, because as you say, some of the disruption and vandalism and problems that are caused in our public toilets have wider causes. I mean, some of the photographs that we see when, you know, for example, you see a toilet that's taken out of commission because of the amount of drug paraphernalia and other things there, is very concerning, and I know that that's a matter of extreme priority for us as a council. So I'm absolutely delighted that this paper's come forward. I'm glad it's looking at investment to improve the fabric of the toilets, but also looking at the cleaning regimes, and pleased that we're now getting the data that enables us to ensure that there's the right focus on the right areas against the right usage, and in terms of designing how we manage our cleaning and other such things. And actually, there was a point made by Councillor Lee earlier in terms of water and electricity. I mean, we now do have sensors in the toilets which flag if there is excess water usage, so that we're able to intervene and make sure that they're repaired. And similarly, there's an active programme right across all our assets to ensure that we have smarter metering, so that again we can see where there is excess usage and intervene accordingly, because as we know, which we'll come on to later, one of the parts of action on carbon isn't just to decarbonise your electricity, but to use less of it in the first place. I had the pleasure of catching up with Mr. Raymond Martin of the British Toilet Association the other day at a parliamentary event marking the Boys Need Bins campaign, which is a national campaign to ensure that male toilets have sanitary bins, because of the increasing number of men who, as a result of prostate cancer or other bowel cancer or other problems are using sanitary products. And there's a point here which I think ties into the business case for extra cleaning, which is one of the consequences of providing sanitary bins and male toilets. I suspect we will have similar savings as a result of having extra staffing available, particularly in the city centre ones, is that your plumbing costs, your need to be unblocking toilets goes down. And indeed, some authorities who've signed up to the Boys Need Bins campaign have seen quite significant reductions in blockages and the associated cost as a result. So there is a point here, which is if we get ahead of things in the way that is planned, hopefully we will see some reflection in the kind of emergency, more expensive, responsive cost that we might have to take on. But the important thing here is that after a long period where not enough has been done to maintain the fabric of our toilets, and not enough, frankly, has been done to keep our toilets clean, we're now coming up with a smart, targeted approach that reflects the level of usage across the district to improve our toilets. It's part of our Pride in Place strategy. You know, you never get a second chance to make a first impression, as we used to say when I worked on Head and Shoulders. For some people, our public toilets are the first impression they get, and so it's important to get them right. So I'm delighted that this paper is coming forward. I look forward to being implemented. Thank you, Councillor Lerney. Thank you to the officers. Thank you, Mr. Hickman, and your team for everything that's been done to get this paper ready, and I look forward to seeing it implemented. On to the next paper, which is, where are we now? The adoption of the carbon. Oh, well, brilliant. As a good point, reminder to go through the recommendations. Let me just confirm the recommendations. So the first is to agree the strategy. The second is to note that there will be a detailed action plan to deliver against that strategy. The third is to approve a supplementary capital investment of £10,000 in order to increase the capital budget and parking and access improvement to pay for improvements to car park toilets in Chesil Street and Worthy Lane, St Catherine's and South Winchester. Subject to agreement to SIL funding in October to reflect the extra pressure that comes from development, to approve a capital budget of 360 and an expenditure of 210,000 SIL funds for the works outlined in the paper, and to note that we will be having further discussion about the refurbishment public communities in Wickham, Bishopswaltham, New Alcester and Denmead with the town and parish councils, and to note that the extra cleaning that will be undertaken at the most heavily used public toilets using some of the reserve funding in the Pride in Place programme. So those are the recommendations, Cabinet. Are you agreed?
Agreed. Thank
you very much indeed. The next item on the agenda is adoption of the Carbon Neutrality Action Plan. Councillor Lerney, could you introduce the paper?
Thank you very much, Leader. During a year where the world has faced unprecedented fire, flood and famine, and projections of global heating have predicted that we will hit the 1.5% level of global heating in the next 5 years, it's only right and unsurprising that carbon neutrality remains the key priority for this district. Last December, Cabinet approved the Carbon Neutrality Roadmap as the evidence base for a revised Carbon Neutrality Action Plan, which would be more data-driven and give an improved focus on key actions to bring down the district's carbon emissions. What we're bringing forward today is not just a council plan, but a plan for the district, using not only our own direct delivery, but collaboration, enabling actions and our influence over others to encourage organisations, businesses and households across the district to play their part in reducing carbon. The plan we've put forward has 5 pathways to net zero: reduced energy consumption, transport, renewable energy, nature-based solutions and local carbon credits. Each of the first 4 pathways has a number of interventions against them, but we have identified 3 priority interventions, which can provide 75% of the emissions reduction modelled, and those are energy efficiency measures in homes, increasing the take-up of electric vehicles, and large-scale renewable energy production. As we go forward, the net zero background is constantly shifting, and since we produced the Cabinet draft, we have had additional data, including Department for Energy Security and net zero data for 2021, and the final report will be amended to include the most recent data we have. Since publication, a few areas which should be clarified in the action plan have been identified. For example, in some places we've used CO2 instead of CO2 equivalent. And importantly, on page 11 of the plan, we say the council accepts the need to develop utility scale PV, but is not stipulating the 50 megawatt to form an upper limit. This is not very clear, and I think we need to match the wording we have in page 26, the target, which says 50 megawatt as a minimum, in addition to the 88 megawatt what's currently in planning. But we can deal with that through the recommendations to deal with any of those minor amendments that might be needed. This is ongoing work which will need to be constantly monitored. We intend to work with stakeholders to further develop our District 2030 carbon data dashboard, improving our metrics and setting clear targets and trajectories which will be regularly publicly monitored. We also plan to set up task and finish groups to work with appropriate organisations and residents on our key pathways such as renewable energy generation. So I'm very pleased to bring this for formal approval today. Many of these work streams are things that we have continued to work on, so we haven't been waiting for approval to get going on a lot of this work, but this sets in place exactly what the council will be doing going forward. So thank you, and I'm happy to take questions and hear representations.
Thank you, Councillor Loney. We do have a public deputation from Joe Crooker, who is the Executive Director of WINAC. So Joe, if you'd like to come forward and make your comments.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm speaking here for Winchester Action on Climate Crisis, known as WINAC. WINAC fully supports the Winchester City Council aim to go greener faster. We welcome the revised Carbon Neutrality Action Plan as a step of progress. The vision laid out by Councillor Lerney in the introductory paper is ambitious and the correct response to the climate emergency. We applaud the principles in the plan that follows. We applaud the processes outlined, in particular task and finish groups, to develop the plan by adding specifics and targets to bring these pathways in line with ambition. This is a key document, along with the local plan, the Green Economic Development Strategy, and so on. So we ask you to address some critical issues within it. The first, I was going to ask for it to be updated to use 2021 data, so we're pleased to hear that that will be incorporated, because using 2020 data as the basis for future planning, being a lockdown reduced emissions year, leads to misleading forecasts. So I'm really pleased to hear about that amendment. We also ask that officers ensure that all the figures are accurate, clearly stated and explained, to ensure that there's consistency and accuracy in this complex problem. And WINAC is happy to help with that task if that would be useful. Thirdly, that for each of the pathways, officers will set out the targets each year between now and 2030 and add them to the plan. And fourthly, that the wording on renewables is amended to make it clear that 50 megawatts is a minimum that will need to be exceeded several times over in future years. Specific targets will need to be set. Perhaps the most urgent action to establish straight away is the task and finish group on renewable energy. We are keen to take part. The Council's aspirations on renewable energy need to reflect the published UK Government National Plan to decarbonise the grid by 2035. We would like to see clear targets so it gives a welcoming environment for the big renewable energy investors and provides a clear indication of land use for this required for the local plan. The district will only be broadly self-sufficient in renewable energy by 2030 with substantial private sector investment. We're concerned that as it stands, the draft CNAP could act as a disincentive to investors. Tackling complex problems requires collaboration, so we are keen to be involved in the task and finish groups whose work will be critical for building in more detail and targets for increasing the scale and pace of action on the climate emergency. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Lerney, would you like to respond?
I'd like to thank WINAC for their support, and we are keen to be on working together going forward, not only with WINAC but other organisations and groups within the city. I think we can deal with all of the points that WINAC have raised today as part of minor amendments. And in particular, we can look at the recommendations and consider what we might do to clarify the way forward and to emphasise our keenness to work in collaboration with others.
Thank you. When we get to the when we've had all our discussion debate, it'd be useful to make some amendments to the recommendations as you suggest. Thank you very much indeed, Joan. Thank you very much indeed also for the offer of help and collaboration. That WINAC has made a tremendous difference over the years to the council's work in this area, and it's greatly appreciated. I should declare a very minor interest in the sense that I was at the dining table of former councillor Robert Hutchison when we came up with the acronym WINAC to represent the abbreviation for Winchester Action on Climate Change as it then was, because it turned out the WAC, which was the original idea, stood for something like the Wichita Community Choir, and so it was not available. Anyway, I believe we have some councillor deputations as well. Councillor Wallace, would you like to come forward and make your comments?
Thank you. So the council has declared a climate emergency and going greener faster is at the heart of the council plan. As the council plan states, climate change is hitting us harder, sooner than expected, with flash flooding, extreme temperatures and water shortages affecting our health, our homes and businesses, chalk streams and rivers and the unique countryside that make our district so special. We have to go greener faster. The Carbon Neutrality Action Plan is a plan for reducing both the district and the council's own carbon footprint. This is a critical document for the council's aspirations over the coming years. So it is with great concern that this plan comes before the Cabinet today with so little opportunity for review and input from members. The proposed plan builds on the roadmap that was approved approaching a year ago. Between the roadmap being approved and now, there have been zero consultations with members. The plan has not gone through any council committees, not the Health and Environment Policy Committee or the Scrutiny Committee. Currently, members do not have access to the minutes from the Carbon Programme Board set up to provide project oversight. And a member briefing on the plan is actually scheduled for next week, i.e. after the plan is meant to be approved. So it'd be too late for any feedback to be considered. In the short period that the plan has been available for review before this meeting, a very large number of questions have been raised on the content. Some of those queries are being voiced today. We heard from WINAC just now about critical issues with the plan and include questions on the energy infrastructure needed to support the activities, questions on the stakeholder analysis, questions on the offsetting plans, including green gas, questions around funding of the activities. These are not minor changes. that could be managed by the corporate officer. These are big issues that it's important for the council to understand before agreeing to a plan that is intended to run for the next 7 years. I'd like to quote again from the council plan. We can't do this on our own. The council performs best when it recognises and listens to the diverse interests, needs and wishes of different people in our community. We need to listen better and work alongside the people and businesses of the Winchester district in tackling the challenges we face. The council needs to start in our own workplace by considering the views of different people in our council before agreeing to a plan that is going to run for the next 7 years. To that end, I request that the Cabinet refers this plan for further review before it is accepted. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Leader. Picking up on some of the points that Councillor Wallace mentioned, the commitment to carbon net zero by the Council following the 2019 climate emergency is to be commended and celebrated. It is much needed. Time is now of the essence as both the climate and nature interlock clocks are ticking faster than ever before. So it's a pity that it's taken 9 months to translate the CNAP roadmap evidence base into a much needed Go Faster plan. But I recognise the translation has required considerable staff effort, so well done to the officers. I have several questions and concerns. The CNAP top 3 priority interventions contribute 75% of district emission reductions. Of this 75%, some 71% is delivered by EV charging, decarbonised cars, plus 18% from interventions, i.e. renewable energy generation, intervention 14. That means that 89% of the biggest carbon reduction interventions were reliant on the big grid upgrade. Successful delivery of these interventions is therefore largely beyond the Council's control, as the energy grid upgrades and connections for increasing renewable energy supply and the capacity demands are unlikely to be possible to meet our 2024 or 2030 carbon target timelines. It is well documented that the renewable energy developers are facing delays of up to a decade to connect capacity to the electricity grid. I note that some of these risks might be mitigated through the local plan for powering down energy demands with LETI low energy standards for housing. Plus, I note the ambition to develop a local area energy plan to facilitate strategic approaches. But most of these mitigators are too small or some way off in the future to make sufficient material difference within the timelines we are needing to work to in the plan. I suggest these risks need to be amplified in the risk management table. So my question, therefore, is what is the planned backup interventions? Should there be a supplementary plan or a plan B? Without some further consideration of these issues and risk, I think the CNAP as presented is perhaps not yet ready for endorsement. My next topic is fundamentals of life, i.e. investment and in funding. Obviously is a key enabler for the successful delivery of the plan. Clearly, delivering the 16 identified interventions of costs of 350 to 650 million is indeed well beyond our controls, Council's ability. And therefore all stakeholders, local businesses and individuals need to play their part with appropriate decarbonising actions. I note on page 38 there is a funding and investment approach. My question, is this the investment strategy or is that still to be produced? My second question relates to the investment and funding is about the Hampshire Local Government Pension Fund. There will no doubt come a time when that pension fund will want to divest away from its 136 million investments in fossil fuels. And as Winchester Council will be working closely with Hampshire County Council and other districts for decarbonisation, is there not a collaborative opportunity to make the case to the Hampshire Pension Fund panel and board to switch this funding to local climate mitigation investment opportunities where they meet good regulatory practices and the required levels of pension fund returns? This is something that Winchester could tap into.
Can this opportunity be investigated and this funding route added to the funding table, plus the Hampshire Local Government Pension Fund Board added to the networks and groups table under the public sector column? My final question relates to stakeholders. As highlighted in the plan, in the networks and groups table, there are a number of stakeholders, but it's not clear whether there's been a full stakeholder analysis. One missing example might be the work that I don't see the Country Land and Business Association under the Rural Natural Environment column. This is likely to be a decarbonising opportunity for our plans from improved land use by working with the Countryside Land Association. So has a stakeholder analysis been completed? Who are our priority stakeholders? If this hasn't been done, can this area be revisited to ensure that there are no missing stakeholders, networks or groups that are key players in supporting the delivery of the very important carbon neutrality action plan? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Bolton.
Morning. I'm very pleased and welcome more detail and clarification regarding the CNAP. At the last performance panel meeting, I raised the issue of the impossible nature of the carbon emission KPI that is only reported annually in arrears. But contrary to assurances this would be improved and made clearer in the CNAP, page 79 of the report does not seem to support this. It states clearly that the data on carbon emissions will be reported annually through the publication of carbon footprint reports. Any KPI must be monitored monthly or quarterly to be given any meaningful chance of correction over such short timeframes of implementation. 2 or 3 years later, finding out how you did is not monitoring its history. If this is not possible, then a proxy needs to be used that measures the deliverables that are projected to achieve the overall emission target. Can you provide detail on how we will be able to confidently monitor the delivery of a net zero policy for the district and council assets in a meaningful and timely manner? Under the networks and groups section, page 86, you have included Extinction Rebellion as a climate stakeholder of Winchester alongside WINAC. Are you proposing to engage with Extinction Rebellion in the same way as we do WINAC? Are you drawing an equivalence between WINAC and Extinction Rebellion's influence and involvement? How will Extinction Rebellion, WINAC and other stakeholder interactions be structured? I'm pleased to hear from Councillor Lerney that accommodation has been made to incorporate the 2021 numbers. Given the anomalous nature of 2020, it would seem bonkers not to do that. So I spare you 2 paragraphs in that sense. As it happens, for some reason, the CNAP also shows that total greenhouse gas emissions for the district in 2020 were 754 kilotons, when in the WINAC source report referred to it as 789. I would be grateful for clarification on consistency of use of data. It still concerns me a great deal that the administration insists on having a policy for the purchase of carbon credits as a means of offsetting any shortfall in meeting either of the net zero targets. Even as a last resort, as stated, we all know that's exactly where you will be when you make your first purchase. This would be sacrificing council taxpayers' money on the altar of the false perfection of an arbitrary net zero target date, rather than investing more in true carbon reduction by insulating more homes, etc. The proposal to build or invest in utility scale green energy generation with the aim to generate carbon credits to offset the council's own carbon emissions raises way more questions than can be dealt with here, but requires proper scrutiny, and this has not happened. Why has this not first gone to the scrutiny committee, and can you assure us it will before agreement at cabinet? I agree with my Green colleagues on this. Can you really justify spending residents' money and inevitably creating a huge web of debt on schemes to build an energy provider with no direct benefit to residents, rather than accelerating and increasing the direct investment in schemes that bring direct and real benefit to residents by reducing energy bills and promoting cleaner energy usage? The difference between the council owning utility scale energy companies and every home having solar PV on well insulated homes with an EV parked in the drive may seem subtle, but in reality, one will cost council taxpayers literally hundreds of millions with no direct benefit to residents other than a net zero certificate or council assets in the Guildhall, and the other will genuinely achieve net zero and bring real benefit to all right across the district. The problem is the latter takes much more time and effort to achieve, but has real lasting benefits to people locally. I particularly think the proposal to raise finance by selling retrofit credits is an exercise in how to net zero, and that is just plain wrong if you believe the priority is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. This amounts to selling our greenhouse gas emission savings achieved by the retrofit programme to other companies, allowing them to greenwash their financials, and results in no net benefit to the planet. That all indicates to me that your goal is more net zero at the expense of local residents rather than for the benefit of local residents. Thank you very much.
Councillor Lerney.
Thank you. Greener, faster. It says it on the front of the paper. This is always one of those things where you have complex plans, and if you wait for absolutely everything to fall into place exactly how you would like it, particularly when we're talking about national policy and national organisations needing to contribute, you will never agree anything. Also, this is not a 7-year plan. This is a review of a plan that has been in place for several years. It's quite a radical review, and it's a much more focused review. But not only is it a review of a plan which already exists, but we will obviously review it several times more before we hit that 2030 timeline. A lot of things may change in the next few years. Obviously, we're quite hopeful that the government will change its stance on things like onshore wind, which could radically change how we look at renewables and where it might be appropriate. And because this is a review of a plan, a lot of work has been going on at the same time as we've been looking at this. The roadmap was looked at by members and scrutinised, and that is the basis on which we've brought forward this plan today. Simultaneously, we've got work going on, for example, Buro Happold on renewables, and I have to say that I think Councillor Bolton's cost estimates are fairly laughable, and I think that we do need to not focus on an individual action. We've identified a number of interventions. Several of those will produce the majority of what we need to achieve, but they are not all that will be going on. And as I say, priorities may shift. What happens in wider society will change. The local area energy plan is going to be a key piece of work in terms of looking to provide that infrastructure, identifying where we need it, and making sure that we can take opportunities as they come forward. I have been in discussions with SSEN and the Southern Gas networks on how this might work going forward. And I know, talking to people from other councils, that they have quite successfully put these local energy plans together, and they are starting to see the impacts on the ground. I think we've got quite a lot of complex issues that have been brought up. In terms of the carbon emissions, clearly we have kind of the gold standard statistics which come forward, and Councillor Bolton is quite right to say that we need proxies. But what we do have is the tool that runs alongside the roadmap, and also why we want to work on the 2030 dashboard, which is what will be reported to scrutiny, to performance panel, and there will be an opportunity to look at that there. I can't tell you exactly what that might look like now because we are going to be working on it with stakeholders. And I would like to reassure the members that the intention is that they be included in those task and finish groups and in the dashboard work. I think I'll pass over to officers to see if they want to add anything around some of the detailed questions that were brought up.
Thank you, Councillor Lerny. I think you've covered it fairly thoroughly. Just to comment briefly on stakeholders, we've identified 7 key categories of stakeholders in the report. We believe that we have identified the ones that we really need to communicate with, but we're certainly amenable to including further stakeholders. The plan includes some details around engagement and annual events for stakeholders. So we would certainly be happy to include Councillor Lee's suggestions of organisations to include in that.
Mrs. Avey.
Thank you. I just wanted to pick up on performance reporting and KPIs that was mentioned specifically. The KPI mentioned specifically is an annual measure that we get externally, so we couldn't pick that figure up quarterly. So this the old carbon action plan and the renewed one will continue to be reported as a tier 1 project, which of course goes to the performance panel scrutiny and then in front of you as it has today. So the actions that we are taking are reported on and are reported on in our quarterly reporting, and will continue to do so.
Thank you. Colleagues, any questions from Cabinet members? I have some questions that I'm happy to ask, and they are, I think, to a degree, as questions for collaboration or for clarification. So obviously, this is this paper over the years has been to, or the Carbon Neutrality Action Plan, the progress of the Carbon Neutrality Action Plan, and the building blocks that have brought us to this point have been to Health and Environment Policy Committee, open forums, etc., as we go through. But one of the questions I did have, and it's possible that Ms. Avey's comment has clarified that, is, well, what is the process for tracking, reviewing, adjusting? Is it just the quarterly report, or I mean, if I could have a bit more clarity about that.
Mrs. Adey may want to add to this, but we do have a carbon board which meets regularly to review the actions that are being taken and progress against them, and that is a board which gives us the opportunity to revisit some of the actions we're taking. Mrs. Adey leads that, so I think she might want to add to the work that's done there.
Thank you. That's right. I hold the board where we discuss progress on all of our projects, and the key projects that have got key milestones come to that board, and then move to the council's performance and capital board to be further discussed there, which is the usual route for us to take for governance through. So behind the quarterly reporting, there are at least 2 other periods where we're assessing our progress and making sure we're on track.
I think that was a point I wanted to clarify. Obviously, the scrutiny committee has a chance to ask in depth about the progress of the. It's the public scrutiny and involvement, and the stakeholder scrutiny and involvement that I think I'm interested in terms of that involvement and feedback on the process. And are there going to be any changes to, for example, the depth of what we bring forward to the quarterly report?
Yes, there are. when this was looked at last time in performance panels, some issues with the format of the reporting were raised, and certainly we've taken those on board. As has been said, we will be looking to work with stakeholders to further develop how we do that. So not only suitable for our internal use and for scrutiny, but also to make sure it's more relevant to the public.
Thank you. And there has been work that, I mean, I touched on earlier, the fact that we're putting smart metering into all our buildings and getting to a point where we know the electricity, gas, water usage for each of our buildings, and also the amount of electricity generated by each of our buildings. I believe that's still happening. I don't know if that's one that Mr. Hendy wants to comment on. But I mean, is that something that we will try and integrate into our more public feedback in terms of progress?
Thank you, Lydia. We are doing that. We've also commissioned external advice on what we could do to actually decarbonise our estate as well over and above. So firstly, what we could do to reduce the use, and secondly, what advice and feeding into the medium-term financial strategy, how we can reap the benefit of reducing and decarbonising the use of energy in buildings as well.
I suppose this comes back to almost a wider point about governance, and this might be one where I ask the Chief Executive, which is this is such an all-encompassing plan for the work across the entire council. Well, first of all, it's not, because of its nature, it's not able to sign off on all the capital projects and all the projects that make up the Carbon Neutrality Action Plan. So, for example, if we take something which I know Councillor Bolton expressed concern about, you know, such as our plans for renewable energy generation, that separately would have its own governance in terms of authorising capital and all the stages of project governance that we would expect of a project of that scale. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Leader. As our colleague director has indicated, we run a programme and capital projects board, and I chair that board, and all projects and programmes of work that are undertaken throughout the council are come through that board, and dependent on the tier which Mrs. Adey referred to, and this is a tier 1 project, then milestones are checked and authorised at that board before progressing to the next stage of investment. And at that board, which consists of our director team and our statutory officers and the project officer, and officers in the room have attended that board and know that it is a rigorous conversation regarding progression. That is the point where we make a decision and ensure that the council is integrated across all of its services for this critical work. And as members have indicated, members are engaged in the specifics and have been engaged under development of certain aspects. For instance, I can see that the Council House retrofit programme has been to HEP. Previous to that, the carbon offsetting programme has come to HEP, and some more work around specifics in our properties. So members are engaged in policy under development through the policy committees. Then it turns to the carbon board, which make a decision how to progress. The go, no go on funding, that decision is made at the property programme and capital board, and then that comes to cabinet or council dependent on the value for consideration. As members know, our project management scheme is subject to internal audit and has received an excellent rating. I'm confident that we effectively manage and integrate these critical projects across our council services. Thank you, Leader.
So if I have understood correctly, as a tier 1 project, the Carbon Neutrality Action Plan will be reported back on, including the associated KPIs, as part of the quarterly reporting process, which is an opportunity for people in scrutiny and other councillors to get involved. Obviously, we've talked about wider informal involvement in plan development and other such things, but that is the formal step. And when we do that, unless we've given authorization somewhere else in the process, we're not automatically signing off on the capital or defining the details of those plans. Where that policy needs to be formed, members need to be involved, capital decisions need to be taken. They will go through the council's regular governance. They will go through HEP, they will go through scrutiny as appropriate, they will go through cabinet, they will go through full council if that's the scale of decision that's being taken. Just so that people have reassurance that this is a framework for action. It's setting out our priorities in terms of driving the overall carbon, but the normal business of how we decide to run the plan elements and scrutinise and involve people on the plan elements will not, it runs in addition to that.
The short answer to that, Leader, is yes. And the moment to interrogate that is at the quarterly report. This is a tier 1 project. Details are provided at the quarterly report. The scrutiny committee has discharged the responsibility for a more in-depth look at the quarterly report to the performance panel. It can be explored at that point, or a recommendation made to scrutiny that a further look should be made at the scrutiny committee or referred to one of the policy committees. So the answer is yes.
Thank you very much indeed. Are there any other questions? Is there any debate? Councillor Cutler.
Yeah, just like make a few comments because I actually found myself quite confused by the Green Party position, and in that Councillor Wallace effectively complained of lack of consultation on this paper, and I think, as you've just described, it's a broad action plan, and I didn't hear anything from him that he felt was missing, or any constructive comment about whether change should be, just purely a feeling that he wasn't involved enough in producing the paper. Whereas Councillor Lee, unless I misinterpreted it, was actually saying that there were so many things that were outside of our control that it was virtually impossible for us to deliver. And I may have completely misinterpreted that, and I do think that is one of the real problems we have with a government that is drawing back from green policies. You can see it every day, and it does make it so much more difficult for us to deliver. And I'd accept that it's more difficult to deliver, but we have to have a plan. And as Councillor Lenny has pointed out, it's a plan that will need continual revision, but we need to have a direction and we need to have a plan. And I think this plan does it.
Thank you. Any other debate? Councillor Thompson.
Yes, thank you, Leader. And I'm really pleased that both Chief Executive and yourself brought up the fact that actions within the CNAP are cross-cutting across this council and involve all departments in trying their best to decarbonise. And in the report itself to Cabinet, it does mention at paragraph 2.7 a number of the strategies that have informed the CNAP. And one of them is the Green Economic Development Strategy, which I know one of the speakers referred to. And this was adopted in 2021, and the first 2-year action plan is almost coming to the end of its life. So I just wanted to make a few comments about the things that we have done during those sort of 18 months and the phase of that 2-year action plan, because we are well on the way to completing the actions that we set ourselves in that phase 1, and we will be coming forward with our phase 2 plans over the next few months. And for example, things that we've done, a scoping paper outlining how we will deliver a sustainable tourism strategy has been presented to Business and Housing Strategy, and we had a policy committee, and we had a number of very helpful debate and comments on that when the policy committee looked at it. And this will set out to deliver, amongst lots of other things, improved connectivity across the district. And it will also encourage businesses working in the tourism sector to adopt more sustainable practices, and also position our district as a sustainable visitor destination, encouraging visitors to make sustainable travel options. And of course, some of the funding for the work under the GEDS plan is being provided by the UK Shared Prosperity and Rural Funds. And at next week's Business and Housing Policy Committee, members will receive a presentation on the projects that have already started and in some cases completed, and also a look ahead at what is planned for the remainder of both these two funds. Many of the projects that have been agreed and supported are contributing to our carbon reduction targets. For example, helping community groups to install solar PVs on community buildings, parish councils installing EV chargers in their car parks, woodland creation and tree planting, and sustainable travel and supporting businesses to switch to renewable energy. Clearly, there's a lot more that can be done, and this is just one area of work that I thought I would highlight that the economy and tourism team are progressing with. But all this helps, and it might be quite small, but all this helps to contribute to our carbon neutral goals and the plan that we are agreeing today. So I'm very happy to support this plan and encourage its delivery in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Porter.
Thank you. On page 103 of the papers, which I think is page 20 of the actual plan itself, it describes really the percentage of dwellings with EPCC or above by tenure in Winchester District, and it shows that actually our social housing is some of the best actually, and our private housing is owner occupied is the lowest. And so finding ways to help those families and those houses through to the next stage of carbon neutrality is a challenge in itself. And on page 19, there are targets for exactly that. So it's, I find it confusing to be told that we aren't taking that aspect of it seriously. We are, very much so. However, I heard on the radio only a couple of days ago that the process, or 2 days ago, that the process of Hug 2 is a challenge because it goes to people with very low incomes, and actually making those investment decisions at the time when the cost of living is so high is another challenge in itself. So we have to think very carefully about what pressures we're placing on people, but actually making them understand that actually long term, on helping them to enable them to make those decisions as a lifetime of a building, not just as a lifetime of that particular family. But there is very clearly a challenge that we are placing on ourselves about the energy efficiency measures in housing, and it is there in black and white in paper and not as implied missing.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Porter. Any other debate? Councillor Lerney, your response to this, and I believe based on the input, what you've heard today and earlier input received, you want to make a slight adjustment to the recommendations. Perhaps you could outline those as well.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I wanted to reflect in the recommendations our commitment to making some of the changes that I referred to in my introduction, and issues which have been brought up today and also previously. So I would like to suggest that recommendation 2 be changed to that the corporate head of service, economy and community be given delegated authority to make changes to the carbon neutrality action plan with regard to design and minor text amendments, and to update data prior to publication. So the addition there is to have the ability to make minor text amendments. And a further recommendation 3, that the council work with stakeholders to further develop performance monitoring and set up task and finish groups to accelerate work on priority actions.
Do we have a seconder for those changes? Councillor Porter, good, thank you. Any other comments before? No. Well, thank you very much indeed, and I think it's been a useful debate. Thank you for the public deputation from WINAC and also the offer for help and collaboration. Thank you for the ongoing challenge that we received from our fellow councillors, and I hope that some of the discussion we've had about the way forward has provided some relief in terms of your particular concerns. So we have, based on the proposal in front of us, and first of all, in terms of the recommendations, I will assume that we're all happy with that we discuss the recommendations as amended. The first recommendation is that we adopt the carbon neutrality action plan for 2023 to 2030. And of course, as has been stated, that doesn't mean that's the last time you're going to see it between now and 2030. There will be ongoing opportunities to upgrade it, but we're adopting this paper today. Secondly, that the corporate head of service, economy and community be given delegated authority to make changes to the carbon neutrality action plan with regard to design and minor text amendments, and to update data prior to publication. So that's an amended recommendation. And then the addition of a recommendation that the council work with stakeholders to further develop performance monitoring and set up task and finish groups to accelerate work on priority actions. So those are the three recommendations in front of us. Cabinet, are you agreed to those recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you very much indeed. I've had a suggestion that we maybe now take a short break after we've had a good session on a few big papers. So I propose that we have a quick adjournment until 11:30, when we'll reconvene and discuss the remaining papers. We are all now here, ready to start again. We have 3 papers to cover, but 4 papers to cover between now and the end of the meeting. The first one being the General Fund Outturn paper. Councillor Cutler, would you like to introduce this paper?
Thank you, Leader. The General Fund revenue outturn and capital outturn are shown in this paper. The total General Fund's baseline net service expenditure was originally budgeted at 16.2 million in 22-23. The outturn position of 16.9 million is in line with updated forecasts reported during the year. Total General Fund outturn position, including additional one-off income and budget, is a surplus of 0.952 million. This is largely down to receiving higher than budgeted income rather than a failure to spend money elsewhere. And significantly, business rates were 0.688 million higher than budgeted. This is partly because business rates are notoriously difficult to predict, and we were very cautious in our budget on that. Investment income was also higher, partly due to having slightly higher balances, but also because of the increase in interest rates, and so investment income was 0.436 million higher than budgeted. So this is a very positive outcome in a year where we've experienced extremely difficult economic conditions, which have resulted in pressures in excess of £1 million on inflation alone, and also the difficult conditions in which to forecast cost and income across our services. For instance, it's very difficult to judge where the cost of living crisis impacts on the number of customers using or buying our services. In terms of the capital outturn, which the 2023 programme, excluding the strategic asset purchase scheme, the expenditure was 9.1 million. The outturn position against that was expenditure. The budget was 9.1 million. Actual expenditure was 4.8. The capital programme has been refocused to include adjustments made for brought forward budgets from 22-23, and they're shown in Appendix 5. During the financial year, the challenging economic conditions and associated uncertainty resulted in no purchases being made through the £20 million strategic asset purchase scheme budget. So this was recognised in the 23-24 budget, which has reduced the standing SAPS budget to 4 million. This paper was extensively scrutinised at scrutiny last week. There were a series of questions, the majority of which have been answered. There is just one outstanding question to respond to Councillor Williams regarding the Bishop's Wharf and footpath and cycle path, and officers have undertaken to do that. So that's my introduction.
Thank you very much indeed. Perhaps unsurprisingly, we don't have members of the public queuing up to make deputations on this one, but we do have Councillor Wallace. So, Councillor Wallace, would you like to come forward and make your comments?
Thank you. Start of this report states the council remains committed to delivering change and tackling the climate emergency, with £2 million allocated to delivering the key priorities of the council plan in February 2023. This is a powerful statement of intent. However, data in the report appears to show a different story. So looking at the last year's data, we had, if I just go through a few of the lines, bike storage, 40,000 allocated, 13,000 spent. Feasibility work on the food waste collection, 150,000 allocated, 24,000 spent. Low carbon transport, 250,000 allocated, 0 spent. Climate emergency activities, 345,000 allocated, 190,000 spent. City offices decarbonisation, 209,000 allocated, 101,000 spent. Derngate flood prevention works, 100,000 allocated, 47,000 spent. EV charging points, 15,000 allocated, 13,000 spent. Energy management projects, 250,000 budgeted, 0 spent. Plus, it appears that £100,000 allocated for additional solar PV for the city offices this year has already been postponed to next year. While some underspend can be attributed to efficiencies, which is obviously a good thing, the very significant overall underspend plus the ongoing delays implies that climate emergency activities are not being prioritised by the council or not receiving the focus that is needed. Please, can the Cabinet confirm that they are taking the climate emergency seriously? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Horrell.
Chair, thank you for allowing me to speak again today to Cabinet. And I'd like to speak positively and proactively for the district, not just making a cheap political point from the chair, which clearly the leader thought was amusing, because our residents want us to solve issues and work together and not just play games. I wanted to note this today, the significant amount of monies invested by the government in our district in the last year. Although I do acknowledge there is a lot of work which goes into grant applications, the multitude of them that we have to apply for in terms of securing these monies. I note the positive outturn of circa 1 million, which is now being moved to reserves, and that there was no need to draw on the 22-23 exceptional inflation reserve. All of that is good news. However, there are a number of points, just a small number of points for clarification today, please. The Guildhall continues to put a drain on resources and is still an issue for the council. We were obviously in deficit on the building in the last year. Can I ask, what are we going to do about this building and seek that clarification from the Cabinet in terms of our plans going forward? Given our additional discussion, given our earlier discussion about additional monies, which we all supported for housing, I think we need to focus on why our homeless programme is so far below our revised budget. I'm surprised we still require, as it says in the report, future spending proposals around such an important area of our work. When will this be available to us, please? I also note our IT budget is below, again, the revised numbers. And I know earlier this year there was an upgrade to councillors' IT provision, but there are many councillors who tell me they're still struggling with IT connectivity to the council system. Can I ask that we have invested all that we intended in the councillor system, and why is it that some are still struggling with that connectivity? There's clearly budget available, and I hope that this can be rectified to everyone's satisfaction. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. Councillor Cutler, would you like to kick off and feel free to send questions around the rest of the team should you need to?
I certainly will, Leader. Thank you. Councillor Wallace was concerned that we weren't taking climate emergency seriously in terms of expenditure, and there are a series of reasons for the slippage in some of those areas. I wonder if officers can detail any of those. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm afraid I don't have the detail, but what I can explain is that there will be some that have moved the spend to the following year. But the way we account as well is if we have a 2-year project, you're given the budget and it's annually accounted for with carried forward into the second year. So the list that was presented doesn't necessarily mean every one of those slipped and moved into the second year. Some of that profile may be intended to be spent in the following year. But those projects again are presented in the in the quarterly report as staged reports with budgets attached.
Yes, so the clear point behind those is that several of them are ongoing projects. The budget isn't lost, the budget rolls over, and some things can't just be done simply within that timescale. And in other cases, I think with the flood alleviation, it's a matter of efficiency, isn't it? Budget being expenditure not being required.
We think that's where it's completed, yes.
But could I ask you perhaps to we'll go through that list and come back to you on that. In terms of Councillor Horrell's point about government money, we do acknowledge, of course, that we have been fortunate to receive some government funding, but unfortunately, this whole culture of councils having to spend a lot of time for bids that they will not necessarily succeed in is a very inefficient way of government funding us. So while it's positive that we have a good team of officers who have succeeded in many successful bids for funding, the particular process for government funding at the moment seems to be hugely inefficient and pretty random. We've done well out of it, but it isn't necessarily a very good process. In terms of Guildhall, I'll ask ask the leader to respond on the Guildhall.
Yes, so there is work underway within the current framework to look at how we can tackle the challenges that we face with the Guildhall. We're moving to a much more granular approach to assessing performance of each of the rooms in terms of how they're doing, in terms of how they're being let out, how their revenue is doing. But the other big area of focus at the moment is a full review of cost. So we're putting smart meters in, so we properly understand our energy usage. We can start to cut back on that, use it in a more targeted and focused way. And we're also we will be looking at other costs that are involved in the running of the Guildhall, making sure firstly that they're properly allocated, but secondly, looking for opportunities to reduce our cost base. Those are the main focus areas. I don't know if Mr. Hendy has any other comments that he wishes to make on that.
Thank you, Leader. You obviously identified the work that's happening in terms of costs, in terms of maximising income. We're again taking external advice to see what opportunities there are to maximise income opportunities. Clearly, the market in terms of letting has significantly changed since the pandemic, and that's why we need some external advice to help us in that respect.
Thank you very much indeed.
In terms of the question on the homelessness programme, I think it was answered at scrutiny, but perhaps Mr. Hendy, you could repeat your answer. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Leader. The use of the reserve is prudent in this respect. We're aware that some of the government funding, for example, the funding for the Rough Sleeps initiative, will be reducing in the future. Therefore, we can use, by being prudent in the use of the reserves, we can bring forward proposals to address the reduction in that funding. So although the report says that their uncommitted balances require further spending proposals, they will be coming forward, as they did before, through policy committee around the homeless strategy, and then onto cabinet to decide the best way to use the existing balances and reserves to make sure we can meet the needs of those most vulnerable households.
Thank you. And finally, the question on the IT budget. Mrs. Keys, please. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, we created this budget to support the big changes that we need for IT to support our staff in that agile working. So that work continues. We've been rolling out laptops to enable staff to work away from the offices. and work is continuing on that. So the budget will be required. We're obviously developing a digital strategy for the organisation, which runs alongside our Transformation Challenge 2025 programme, where we're looking at the way that services are delivered. So clearly that meshes with the agile working. And Councillor Horrell mentioned about IT connectivity issues for members. If there are any specifics, please do report those to us. But we are reviewing the equipment offer for members and what is required for you all to be able to work in the most efficient manner going forward. So that is under review as well.
Thank you. I think with that review, it may be worth having discussion with members, particularly those that have had problems with it. I mean, there's certainly been some issues with the sort of revamped iPads that you know, by restricting them to a greater extent has actually made them slightly less usable for some of us, and that in itself probably needs explaining more than anything else. But also there is clearly some problems for some people, so we need to get to the bottom of that.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from Cabinet? Do we have any debate? Councillor Cutler, do you have any final thoughts?
Well, I think given that it was, we came out of COVID where budgeting was very, very difficult, and we had somewhat hoped that it would improve in the 22-23 budget and be more stable, given the economic crisis that sort of has developed in this country since. I think we're in a good position. It's prudent to be more cautious. The fact that we ended up with a surplus over our budget is better than being the other way around. And given the state of finances of many councils in the country, I'm pleased that we are in this position to continue to manage our finances very prudently.
Thank you very much indeed. Yes, I completely agree, and a big thank you to the officers for ensuring that we are in quite a different place to many local authorities around the country, and fully intend to remain so. So, colleagues, the recommendation in front of us is a relatively straightforward one, which is we have 4, which is to note the outturn, the revenue outturn and the capital outturn as set out in the report, approve the transfers to and from the major investment reserve as detailed in Appendix 1, note the reserves and closing balances in Appendix 2, approve the capital programme for 23-24 as revised, set out in Appendix 5, and note the 2023 to 2033 capital programme as set out in Appendix 6. Cabinet, are you agreed with those recommendations? Great, thank you very much indeed. On to the next paper, which is the housing revenue account. Councillor Cutler, I believe you're going to introduce this one on behalf of Councillor Westwood as well.
Thank you, Leader. The housing revenue account outturn paper shows the detail on both the revenue account and the capital outturn. Council had a net deficit on its HRA revenue account just over 1.3 million for the 22-23 financial year, an overspend on the revised budget of 0.7 million. This reduces the HRA balance as at 31st of March 23 just from 16.7 million to 15.4. Should be noted, however, that approximately 1.4 of additional in-year expenditure related to a one-off accounting adjustment that was required to adjust for the timing of a one-off payment. This has been reversed out of the new financial year, as is explained in the Q1 monitoring report, which you'll see later, to have a zero impact on the HRA budget. excluding this adjustment, the underlying HRA outturn was actually an underspend of 0.7 million. The specific detail of the reasons for this are set out in the report. In terms of capital outturn, the total expenditure in the HRA capital programme was 24.141 million, which was 14.228 million lower than the revised budget. This was attributable to an underspend of 1.2 million on housing services and 13 million on the new homes programme. Again, the specific reasons behind these and the carry forward of budget to rephase it for future years is set out in the report and the appendices. This report again was looked at in great detail at scrutiny last week. There were quite a lot of questions asked, most of them resolved, but there were two, I think, outstanding areas which perhaps I could ask Mr. Hendy if he could respond to. The first was about a question on the funding allocated for overheating mitigation measures and whether it was part of the current plans. And the other one was the expected number of new homes to be delivered in the revised budget, 23-24. So, Mr. Hendy or Mrs. Knight, thank you.
Mr. Handy.
Yes, thank you, Leader. In relation to overheating, there are no proposals in the current HRA business plan to deal with issues of overheating at the moment. You'll be aware that we'll be bringing forward a new HRA business plan to November Cabinet as part of the overall medium-term financial strategy, and all the council's obligations in relation to investment in its housing stock will need to be taken into account at that time. Turning to the second question in terms of the new build programme, so we can confirm the expected completions in this financial year 23-24. The new build programme is 135 homes, which will bring the cumulative total at the end of this financial year to 306. We have a programme up to the end of 2030, as you're aware, and I know you're also aware that it's becoming quite difficult to deliver viable schemes in relation to the cost pressures that the Housing Revenue Council is experiencing in terms of the cost of building and also the cost of borrowing to finance development as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler, for your introduction. We have one public deputation and two councillor deputations. So if I could ask, I don't know if it's David Chafer or Monica Gill. David, David, come forward and speak on behalf of TACT.
We've only been able to take, thank you very much for asking us. We've only been able to take this paper to TACT support group because at the moment TACT committee is only myself, and but to be honest, the chap that was going to ask most of the questions is not here. But we do understand and listen very carefully at scrutiny. But in the past, we've had a paper which we could understand. And this is a little bit beyond our comprehension, although it's been explained to us. But at the end of the day, we could read it and understand that there was issues beyond the control of most people that affected the budget. And we do know that the HRA being ring-fenced, any outrun, as you call it, is listed that goes forward into the new year. In November, we have changed the date of the TAC meeting so that we can fully be briefed on the budget before Housing Cabinet meeting and look forward to being informed on that. But all the recommendations are in order to keep the system going. And we know at times issues come up that you have to deal with, and I think you've dealt with them to, you know, and it's explained. That's all I can really say. We understand the system, but yeah, in the past we've had a more simplified layout of the budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Chafe. I don't know if officers want to respond to that question and how we're able to present the budget or the outturn in ways that are more digestible to the general reader, shall we say.
Yes, certainly. I sympathise with TACT. It is quite a complicated paper. We have in the past had dedicated meetings to meet with TACT in respect of discussing the budget, so they understand what we're proposing to spend, why we're proposing to spend it, the obstacles that may be available, and also to take into account their opinion on how they wish also to consider how the budget is framed. We are having a meeting, as David has said, with TACT and TACT support, and Mr. Johnson will be joining me for that meeting in November. And we normally provide a summary paper, and we will be doing that in the same form. And last time we did a bit of a page turner, and I think it was really helpful last year to do that. So we'll be doing that again this year.
Thank you. I hope that provides some degree of reassurance.
We're pleased with that to happen.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Mr. Chafe, and thank you for all your work on behalf of TACT. It's much appreciated. We have two councillor deputations. Councillor Wallace.
Thank you. So I'd like to thank you for answering the question on overheating. I know brilliant. Secondly, and I fear I might sound like a bit like a broken record here. Section 1.2 of the report states that 15.7 million has been included in the capital programme to fund retrofit works to existing homes over the next 10 years. This sounds great. Improving the energy efficiency of council homes will benefit both tenants and the environment. But it's no good having the funding if the council doesn't do anything with it. In 2020-21, the original approved budget was 1,030,000. The actual spend was 60,000. In 2021-22, the original approved budget was 1,587,000. The actual spend was 38,000. Last year, the original approved budget was 1,512,000. The actual spend was 272,000. So over 3 years, the council planned to spend 4.1 million on housing upgrades, but has actually only spent 370,000. Moreover, my understanding is that over the past 3 years, only 4 homes have been upgraded out of the council's 5,000 homes total. This is appalling, even more so when you consider it against the background of the cost of living crisis. The purpose of this retrofit programme is to improve the energy efficiency of council homes. Delays to the programme mean that some of the most vulnerable members of our society are being hit with astronomical energy bills that could and should have been avoided. The revised budget for this year for the retrofit programme is 2,696,000. Please can Cabinet confirm that the retrofit work this year is on track and that the retrofit project has started to turn around? Thank you.
Mr. Hendy, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, thank you, Leader. Just in terms of the question, yes, we have a programme in relation to the £2.6 million, and we're on track with that programme that was presented to Business and Housing Policy recently. It's Difficult to give an exact figure on the number of homes which will receive retrofit works. So we talked about a range of homes that would receive that works at that meeting. It could be circa sort of 450 to 520 homes, will be somewhere around that, because some of our customers, for very valid reasons from where they are at the moment, are not taking up the offer of some of that retrofit work. But we can give you assurance that we are on track to deliver that programme this year.
Thank you very much. Councillor Horrell, you also want to make a deputation.
Chair, thank you again for allowing me to speak. The HRA account, as we have mentioned earlier today, is well managed and the service is absolutely robust, which has obviously allowed us to benefit from the Department of Levelling Up grants, Homes England money, as just two examples of money coming in to a very good organisation. I therefore thank officers for their continued efforts and being in a position where that could happen. The HRA budget has been managed well in very difficult and changing circumstances through the year, which Councillor Cutler has already referred to. However, I would like to ask one or two specific questions of Cabinet today. Have we put in place any specific measures to mitigate against the risk of the trend for disrepair compensation? It is a topic that comes up continually, and I don't see that particularly recorded on any risk register at this time. We noted in the HRA budget that significant staff shortages in roles where there is no deputy has impacted our ability to deliver our objectives. Does the Cabinet have a plan to improve the staff recruitment process so that we can fill some of these very important posts? And if so, what is it? Can I ask, are you still committed to delivering the new homes programme? I hear issues raised by officers about the financing and issues that we may be facing as an organisation, but I seek reassurance formally from you that you are still committed to the 1,000 new homes that we have collectively endeavoured to build over the last few years. Is the £205,000, which we asked a question about at scrutiny on the Tower Street new build programme in support of what was clearly a wayward plan to renovate that building, going to be refunded to the tenant's budget? Thank you.
I don't know if you caught all those questions, Mr. Handy, but it'd be very helpful if you could run through a response for those at least that are in the officer scoop.
So thank you, Lee. The first question is about whether there's specific provision in relation to disrepair. We don't have specific provision in relation to disrepair. Clearly, any disrepair claims that come to the council would have to be met from existing budgets. You'll be aware there is an increasing attention paid by some solicitors to support our customers to make disrepair claims, and often that's not totally to the advantage of some of our customers because of the fees that they end up paying those solicitors, and therefore we are encouraging customers where they have issues around disrepair to contact us immediately so that we can make sure that we can deal with the issue and in effect make sure that the tenant's money goes to the disrepair and to the tenants and not to the fees for solicitors. The next question was around recruitment and staff. I'm sure Councillor Horrell was referring to specific vacancy that was in relation to the community improvements works, where there was a vacancy during last year, which meant we couldn't spend about £200,000. We've successfully recruited somebody to do that now. We don't have any specific proposals around that, although where we have critical posts in relation to the service, we will employ agency staff to cover that. course, agency staff come at a premium, so we will try and avoid that wherever possible. So we will seek to recruit from the market if we possibly can. The next question is around the New Homes Programme and a commitment around that. I mentioned in relation to previous question, we have a programme that would deliver 1,000 homes up to 2030. As always, that is dependent on the viability of delivering those schemes. It's as I've mentioned before, it's difficult to achieve a viable scheme that will achieve a net present value within 30 years based on the current cost of building and current cost of the interest rates. And if we can't return a net present value to a scheme within 30 years, in effect, that means the rest of our customers are tenants are subsidising that scheme rather than that scheme providing a net income back into the housing revenue account. And lastly, the £205,000 Tower Street refund. I think that's been charged. Councillor Knight wants to come in on that. It's a cost to the HI at the moment.
I think we can add that we are totally committed to the 1,000 houses. Circumstances change, economic circumstances change, and that may be lumpy. It won't necessarily be 100 a year. It might be 80 one year and 120 the next. We will work as hard as we possibly can to achieve that target.
Thank you for that reassurance, Councillor Cuthbert.
Yeah, no, I'd endorse the point that was made there about the commitment to 1,000. There may be some other choices that are consequent on that, and we need to be realistic about the cost and interest rate environment that we live in. But the chance that we face a 7-year construction disaster of the kind that we've seen following the mayhem, the economic mayhem of the last 12 months I think is unlikely, and we're taking some very practical steps, and we will be taking some very practical steps, for example, on the subject of nutrient neutrality, in order to ensure that we can restart our building programme, which is an example of where policy has held us up in the past and where we've worked very hard to overcome those challenges. So those are, I think all of those questions were answered. Cabinet, are there any other questions to the paper? Is there any debate? Councillor Porter.
It's not a question specifically so much as potentially a debate, but the question is that the Disabled Facilities Grant, which we talked about in the general outturn, obviously affects the HRA paper as well, and we have taken action recently to make sure we can spend that better. I just wondered if anybody would like to outline, perhaps Mrs. Knight might like to outline how we've done that, because that's it's not HRA. I do appreciate that.
Is that general fund or HRA?
It's a general fund paper, but it doesn't support. So it doesn't support. It's only for private housing. Okay, I apologise.
Through you, Leader, we can't spend disabled facilities grants funds on the housing revenue account. Housing revenue account funds the disabled adaptations to the housing revenue account.
Okay, well, I'm glad that's been clarified. Thank you.
There was a question actually that came out of, I think, Councillor Wallace's comments. I mean, I just wanted reassurance. We are working very actively to dramatically accelerate the amount of refurbishment that's going on to cut carbon. That is my understanding, but could I just have clarification? I mean, I'd almost use the word violently accelerate, but dramatically will do for the time being.
As I mentioned, Leader, we have a programme to deliver at least the maximum would be 520 to upwards of that number this year, homes that would receive retrofit works. It's more appropriate to talk about a range because we rely on customers allowing us into their homes to undertake the work, and not all customers want to do that. So it could be anything from 400 to 520, but that is what we're programmed to do this year. And we're on track in terms of the procurement for that at this point in time. So at this point in time, there's nothing to suggest that we won't be achieving that sort of level of retrofit work.
That's very reassuring and more the kind of scale of number that I think we hoped we would be seeing. So any other questions or comment or debate? Councillor Cutler.
Well, I think again on the retrofit thing, because Councillor Wallace talked about the past as well. I think it's worth reminding that we initially had a retrofit program that was was voids only, and that was causing it to be too slow. And the decision last year to move into actively with tenants present has accelerated the program. So, but that takes some time to get moving, which is why this year will be the year where we will see a lot of change.
But that's a very fair point and a useful example of how that commitment to go greener faster is feeding through into the work of the council right across the board. If there are no comments, can I thank officers, both the housing team and the finance team, as ever, for their reassuring excellence in management of the HRA. It's greatly appreciated. I know from what we see all the time that there's always different money and other challenges and changes in interest rates and construction costs and everything all hitting you all the time, and your ability to navigate us through these challenges is greatly appreciated. So thank you very much indeed. The recommendations we have in front of us are to note the outside figures detailed in Appendices 1 and 2, approve the carry forward of that would be 18,000 of HRA revenue funding in paragraph 11.4. Note the housing capital programme for major works and new build as outlined in paragraphs 11.5, 11 to 11.8 and appendices 3 and 4. Note the funding of the 2023 HRA capital programme as detailed in paragraphs 11.10, 11.11 and appendix 5, and approve the revised capital programme budget of 35.653 million for 23-24 as detailed in paragraphs 11.12, 11.13 and appendices 6 and 7 that take account of potential programme slippage and profiling of the expected spend. Cabinet, are you agreed with those recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you very much indeed. We now move on to item 13, which is performance finance and performance monitoring. Councillor Cutler, would you introduce the paper, please?
Thank you, Leader. This is our regular quarterly financial and performance monitoring report. It does provide a refreshed set of key performance indicators that were adopted last year. This is the first time these KPIs have been used. The paper has gone through extensive scrutiny of a 2-hour performance panel meeting with quite a lot of questions and clarification, and then also at the scrutiny committee. There were 2 areas really that I think were raised under those scrutiny meetings. One being some of the KPIs not actually being populated yet with data and the need to get that done as soon as possible. And the other was around the KPI on fly tipping, where it was felt that the clear up rate may well be a good KPI, and we will investigate that. Officers are investigating the approach to that. There is also some query around whether whether reports are getting through because of the way that the app works, and again we will investigate that. So the report is before you, and we can take questions and comments.
Thank you, Councillor Cutler. I believe the only person down to speak on this is Councillor Horrell, so I don't know if you'd like to come forward and say a few words.
Thank you, Chair. Just a matter of process. I'm slightly surprised that we don't see tabled here formally today the comments from scrutiny last week. Although the minutes haven't clearly been published, there were some comments on the panel, and normally that would come as a note to you at Cabinet. So that's just a process point that I was expecting to see. Councillor Cutler rightly indicated that we still had some KPIs that had not been populated in the report, and obviously you can't scrutinise what isn't available to you. I think that's quite important. I appreciate this is a new set of indicators, but we do still have some gaps. There was a discussion, Chair, about the RAG articulation, which is important in highlighting those projects that need some further attention. And I know that the officers had committed to look at that and make sure that that was accurate. And as Councillor Cutler said, there was some discussion about a slightly different version of the fly tipping KPI, not just the number of fly tipping reports, but actually the resolution of those. But Chair, we've spent some time this morning talking about the carbon plan. And I think it's fair to say that we're probably in a chicken and egg situation, because you referred to the fact that the panel on behalf of scrutiny should be reviewing that. But as you'll note in item 27, 28 and 29 from the performance panel notes, there was still some lack of clarity. And in fact, I think the indicator at that time was that the Carbon Neutrality Action Plan, which you reviewed this morning, would have more detail on the projects, which would then allow us to have a better discussion about their progress. So in fact, we need to populate that to be able to deliver what you were indicating we would be expected to do, particularly in Q2. So I'm seeking reassurance from you that we will have that followed through, so that the targets that are missing will be populated, and we'll have that clarity, particularly on the tier 1 projects that were the tier 1 project, as mentioned earlier today, so that we can ensure that we deliver as you indicated earlier. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell, for those comments. Work out who that sits, I think, with Mrs. Adey, in terms of just confirming that there will be the adjustment to the carbon reporting as mentioned.
Yes, I'm happy to confirm that. Could I just set expectations? As we've discussed today, the major projects that we're working on are already the projects that are going on. So those will slot into the Carbon Neutrality Action Plan. So the retrofit on homes, the renewable energy project, they're largely projects we're already reporting on, but the Q2 report will more clearly fit under the CNAP. But I just wanted to set expectations that if anyone's expecting a brand new set of actions, they're not all brand new actions. Many of them are going faster, accelerating on the actions we've already got.
Thank you for that clarification. Do we have any other questions? Any debate? Councillor Lurley.
Yeah, I think it's important to mention that we have had the notes from scrutiny, but they haven't been published because they're still draft, but we do have them before us on the table, and certainly I've read through them, and I was also present at the meeting where the relevant items were discussed.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Lurley. I think that's a very good point. Yes, I was also at the meeting where the items were discussed, and indeed we do have draft minutes. In terms of the particular resolutions that we might normally have in front of us, that the meeting did note the minutes that we do have in front of us here. The performance panel minutes are part of our report, and we have had a chance to look through those, so they are part of our consideration. And I think most of the actions, if not all of the actions in there that still needed doing, were actions for officers to take, and I'm reassured that those are underway. The issues that were raised that weren't in the main report, we have touched on in terms of fly tipping, and there was a discussion of HVO as well. And we will obviously follow up on those points as we move towards decisions and review of the performance of either of those. In terms of the specific requests, I think we've talked about them, which is the request that the fly tipping app include a submit button more clearly. And we're asked to consider the performance, a key performance indicator that measures the time taken to remove fly tips end to end. I think we've done the, Councillor Early, do you have a view?
Just a further point that we're now actually quite well on in the year, and obviously officers have been working on Q2 reporting as we've gone along. So I think it will definitely have to be best endeavours in terms of fixing everything for Q2 rather than Q3.
Absolutely, I think it's a fair point, and I think the point about KPIs is we're mindful of what's being introduced. We also know that there are different KPIs on various topics coming at us from government. For example, Michael Gove has decided there are certain metrics that matters to him, which we happen to disagree with him on in terms of fly tipping. While I think the ongoing process of performance management means that we'll always be looking at our KPIs. What we also don't want to do is swerve around so that we have no continuity from one meeting to the next. So I think the intention would be to stay as we are, but as we move to the next review point, perhaps start thinking about if there's a review point that would come for looking at how we look at performance in 24, 25, that would be an appropriate moment. There are also, I think it's important to note, KPIs that don't make it onto documents that do get looked at, and it will be important that we keep scrutinising those to ensure that the basic performance is where we would like it to be. Are there any other debating points? Well, I'd like to thank colleagues and officers for the tremendous amount of work that is reflected in this particular paper, and also for the work of the performance panel and the scrutiny committee in going through and asking useful and insightful questions that raise important issues which help get extra focus on things that might need more attention, which is also appreciated. So the recommendation in front of us is to note the progress achieved during Q1 and endorse the contents of the report. Cabinet, are you agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. And the last item on the agenda is the forward plan. Are there any specific? Oh well, we're asked to note the future items for consideration by Cabinet. There's no deputations here. I'm assuming you've all read it. Cabinet, are you happy to note that report? Thank you. On that basis, I think we've covered all of it.